So it's a great pleasure to be here today to talk with you about family business succession. That is what we live and breathe in our own family business. So we are a family business that consults with family businesses, consults to family businesses. My son and daughter are over in the corner over there. And we go in as an intergenerational and a multidisciplinary consulting team working with the two generations that are working through the succession process. So we are integrally involved with the two generations as they plan for and as they implement their succession and transition process. So a little bit about our backgrounds. We all have backgrounds in psychology and in business. And a little bit about me. I've actually been doing this a very long time. Dating myself here, I actually started working with family business succession about 30 years ago. And the interesting thing is that at that time, there was very little that was happening in this whole area of family business succession. And now it is such a hot topic because of the baby boomer exodus and just the times we are in. But at that time, the reason I started working with family businesses and family business succession is because I was in the mental health field. And I was actually the CEO of a mental health agency. And in that role, I was looking at some of the cases that were coming in to our agency. And there were several business owners coming in, not because they had heavy-duty mental health issues, but because they were in the process of a family business transition. And there was conflict, and there was chaos, and there was turmoil, and a lot of stress and tension going on in that family business. So that's when I really started taking a look. And this was many, many years ago. There were very few people around here, especially, talking about it. And I came in contact with a group. And we are members of different organizations as a team ourselves. But I came across a group that was studying family business succession 30 years ago. And that was the Family Firm Institute. And they were studying and researching and looking at best practices and bringing that all together from across the globe. They are, I believe, in 80 countries now, 80. And so this was a phenomenal process for me to really learn about family business succession because it is the most complex type of transition. Every transition is difficult for us human beings. Business transitions are complex, but then you add the family factor in there, and that takes it to a whole new level. So my background, my education and training is in intergenerational family therapy, and that helped me a lot in working with very, very complex cases in family business situations. And the thing with the Family Firm Institute is that we really have looked at how do different advisors come together to form a seamless team and work with our clients, the family business itself, in order to facilitate and really make it a smooth transition. I was extremely honored last year to be recognized and awarded fellow status in the family business consulting field, and this was one of 12 people worldwide. And the reason I bring this up is that there are certain things happening globally that I think are very, very important for us to pay attention to as we look at what is working in the family business field. So some of what I am going to talk about today, and let me make sure this is working here. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about success. A lot of presentations I have done through the years are about what has not worked in family business transitions and how do we get them to work. So I wanted to make this a different type of discussion today and talk about success and longevity in family businesses. We're going to look at some of those statistics, which all of you are familiar with, and some challenges that are there throughout a process of transition. We're going to take a look at the oldest family businesses in the world, as well as the oldest family businesses in America. And we are going to then really look at what are some key success factors in these long-term family businesses that have survived generation after generation. So how do we define success in family business? I'd like to hear from anybody that has any thoughts on success. Sorry? Profitability. I do have that up there. Yes, thank you. Profitability. What else? Anyone? Okay. Happiness. Excellent. Yeah, profitability, happiness. So I have just a few up there. There may be many different definitions of how we look at success in a family business. It could be things like growth, definitely profitability, that happiness or family harmony. So we want business success, and at the same time, we want family harmony. And those two, at times, are in conflict with one another because of where the family is at and what needs to happen within the business. So for today's purposes, we are really going to focus on longevity and the ability to master succession as a key indicator of success within the family business. And here are those same statistics that we've been talking about or alluding to today that are very alarming and have been there for a long time. Research has shown that 30% make that transition first to second generation successfully. Second to third, it is 12%, and only 3% that survive the third to fourth generation. Once again, why is this? Why do we see this happening? And as different people have already mentioned today, that failure to plan is a key to this not working. But the part that we end up working with in our business a lot is the avoidance factor. And it's the avoidance of those difficult emotional, psychological, and relationship issues, which are very difficult. If I need to make a decision as a business owner that's going to create conflict with my spouse or with a child, if I need to pick one child over another, I'm just going to avoid that discussion rather than go there. because that could be very, very difficult from a family standpoint. And the more I do that, the more problematic it can become. So those are some of the areas that we end up taking a look at and working with. Some of the challenges of succession that I have listed here. Now, by no means are there only 3 in the older generation and 3 in the younger generation. There are many different challenges that one can encounter, but some of the ones that we deal with day in and day out are those that I have listed. The number one area with the business owner is that letting go of power and control. When we have had a very successful owner or an entrepreneur who has had a lot of power and control, it is going to be very difficult, even if they want to move into retirement, for them to let go, because their whole identity is tied to the business. So the whole thinking is, if I'm not in the business, who am I? This has been my baby. I have put my blood, sweat, and tears into this business day in and day out. How do I now move into the future? I've had no time for hobbies. What am I going to be doing in retirement? So this becomes a very difficult process. And we see a lot of denial, we see avoidance, and we see resistance to the whole process of planning and executing the plan. In the younger generation, the whole area of individuation and differentiation. Any person, any human being going from childhood to adulthood needs to carve out their own identity, separate from their family of origin, but at the same time, they need to maintain a relationship with their family. It's not one or the other, it's and both. That is a difficult process in and of itself, even if you're not in a family business. But it becomes much more complex when you're in a family business, because day after day, we are not living somewhere else and visiting our family at Thanksgiving and Christmas. We are working with them every single day. So parents and children and siblings need to interact with each other. And how do I have a voice? How do I create that separate identity and at the same time have strong relationships and constructive relationships within the family? We've already touched on a couple of the other points here in terms of what does that younger generation really need to learn in order to be successful, not only in terms of technical skills in the family business, but what do they need to succeed as the next generation owner and leader, as well as establishing credibility. And that was talked about during the panel discussion quite a bit, that if I am the owner's son or daughter, how do I really get that credibility so that people aren't looking at me in a way to judge me and say, oh yeah, of course, you aren't going to come in on time, you're going to work from home, and all those other pieces. Three-circle model of family business, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, but once again, and it's hard to see here in the colors, but each of these circles is very complex, a complex system in and of itself, and then we have them coming together and intertwining, which is what makes family business transitions as difficult as they are. So we do a lot to take a look at what is going on within the ownership structure within the business and as well as the family system. We are going to switch gears now and talk about going from what doesn't work and where the complexities are to what does work, and looking at sustainability and longevity. So I have a quote here: is there any institution more enduring than a family business? Before the multinational corporation, there was family business. Before the Industrial Revolution, there was family business. Before the Enlightenment of Greece and the Empire of Rome, there was family business. And this professor, William O'Hara, was a professor at Bryant University in Rhode Island. He did a lot of research on longevity and success in family business. And what he really noticed were certain factors that we will be alluding to and talking about in a little bit. So some statistics here. Almost 1,000 family businesses were founded before the year 1700 that are still in operation today. And here is the really interesting part. More than half of them, 53% of them, are actually located in one country. And we'll talk about that a little bit, and also take a look at why is that. So the oldest family business dates back to the year 578, and it has mastered succession for 46 generations. Now think about that, because a lot of the work that we do, we see such difficulty in even the first to second generation transition. And some of these family businesses have survived and done very well through many generations, 46 to be exact here. So let's open this up for some discussion. Which country do you think, or maybe you know, which country is it that has the oldest family businesses? 53% of family businesses in the world are in this country. Anyone in the audience want to take? Sorry? Germany? Oh, sorry. Wow. There we go. No, not Germany. Nice. There are some very old family businesses there, but it's not Germany. Italy? Another good guess, and there are some old ones there as well, but no. Another good guess? Not really. Let's have a couple more, and then I will tell you what it is. China. Not quite. Any others? Sorry? I couldn't hear. Japan. Who said that? Wow. Yes, that is exactly what it is. It is Japan. Does anyone know why? Why Japan? Family values, absolutely. Let me zero in on the number one reason why it has been Japan. There is a system in Japan that has been in place for centuries now that is about legally adopting an adult to come into the family business and run it. So in the Japanese culture, how things worked was that you needed a son The oldest born son usually took over, but when there wasn't any sons in the family business, or the son was not capable of taking over as the owner or next generation leader, what they did was bring in somebody from the outside who would actually be adopted legally and who would give up his own family name and take on the name of the family business. And this actually happened more with daughters. So if you had a daughter, there was a system of marrying the daughter to somebody who was very capable of taking over the family business. And this adopted son-in-law came in, and this worked very, very well. And to this day, this practice goes on and has been very successful. So almost 100%, it's 90 plus, some say 98%, of Japan's 81,000 adoptees are males between the ages of 25 and 30. And we will talk about why some of this works as well. I have a podcast. It was actually, I started out with a video that didn't work very well. I need to actually set it up, and I'm hoping that'll work. So if you can give me just a couple of minutes here.
Okay, so I went through the oldest and some of the recipe for success. Well, there are lots of ingredients that go into making a successful business, but it seems a large part of it is that family-run businesses aren't as myopically focused on things like quarterly returns and tend to project continuing the family tradition and name going on a much larger scale. This is a long-term focus, to be sure. So now what makes Japan so in tune with the business of longevity? Well, in Japan, they have a bilateral kinship system. That is to say that both the female and male line of descendants are recognized. But Japan also has a succession largely determined by patrilineal succession of head of household. So heading a household gives one the control of the household and estate, which would include things like farmland, businesses, etc. This aspect of Japanese life was usually handed down to the eldest son. Now, over so many years, you can imagine sometimes an eldest son wasn't available, like only daughters, or maybe someone had no sons. How would the family business and name continue on? The answer to this was adult adoption. And Japan has a long history of this dating back to the 13th century. So when a family found they didn't have a male heir, or they had an incompetent or disabled son, they looked elsewhere, outside the family, in the form of adult adoptions. Used mostly by samurais at first, it gained popularity outside the samurai class in subsequent centuries. So what would happen is a family might marry their daughter to a man, then adopt that man into their family. He would become what is known as a mukiyoshi, meaning adopted son-in-law. In doing this, the man would assume the family's last name and continue on their lineage as if he were now part of that family, abandoning his old family in name anyways. But what if the family had no sons or daughters? Well, in this case, a family would still adopt a male heir, and this would be most seen amongst families and second sons. You see, the second-born son couldn't be the head of a household if an elder son took the position. So it was advantageous for a second son to be adopted by another family to become the heir of that household/business. And once you're head of a household, you gain prominence in a community, so win-win for everyone. And if the new adoptee was not to be marrying a daughter, they are free to marry whom they like while carrying on the family name. In modern day Japan, this still occurs, and particularly when a business has no male heir. This adopted son is usually chosen for being business savvy, and this is done with the goal of preserving the family business. You might be familiar with businesses like Suzuki, Kikkoman, and Toyota. These companies all practice this tradition of adult adoptions. You'll see members of the founding families in leadership in these companies today. Incidentally, these companies are pretty old themselves, all being over at least 75 years old. Now, initially, early on in the 20th century, being a mukiyoshi, or adopted son-in-law, was looked down as being embarrassing. Some might say a real D-baller. It was looked at as being kind of emasculating. But as Japan's business sector grew and birth rates fell, this practice started being more closely associated with big companies. And being the head of a big company is positive in a capitalist society, so views quickly changed and adoption rates climbed. In fact, Japan has some of the highest adoption rates in the world, and according to The Economist in 2011, there were more than 81,000 adoptions in Japan, and 90% of those adoptions were of adult males in their 20s and 30s, the right age to start mentoring someone to take over a family business. And I'll link to this article in the show notes. It's an interesting read, so check it out. Now, this practice also has another benefit. Family-run businesses are surprisingly competitive and often outperform other companies that aren't family-owned. You see, rather than the decay of nepotism, infusing new outside blood to the family bolsters business. So they bring in new ideas that are fresh and, have something to prove. Instead of a disinterested heir who might be lazy and doesn't understand what it takes to maintain an edge, an adopted heir eager to prove himself and keep the name strong brings a focus that encourages lasting power. And that's the story, listeners, of the oldest companies and some of what helps to keep them going.
Okay, so we've looked at one country that has had very successful processes in terms of family business succession, and they have had a unique way of dealing with it, which is this adopted adult son-in-law to come in, and they have found that this has actually improved business performance tremendously. But let's look at some other ones worldwide. So I've just listed a couple from Japan. The first one, Kongo Gumi, really did very, very incredible Buddhist temples. That's what their construction was about. And they are still in operation today and doing very well. As you can see, there's all types of businesses, from innkeeping and wine and olive oil and glass and paper and gold. And once again, shipbuilding, ceramics, firearms. I want to zero in on the last bullet, though, which is a Spanish family business located in Barcelona, which was established in the year 1551, known as Codorniu Reventos, because we are going to talk about that a little bit later. I met the 18th generation, and actually Greg and Anjali did as well. The 18th generation, one of the people in the 18th generation of this family business, and have gotten to talk with him over time. He lives in Barcelona, but I talked with him as recently as a month ago. So we will talk a little bit about some of what he has looked at as their success factors. Looking at America's oldest family businesses, the first one, Zildjian Cymbal Company, we will talk a little bit about that one. Most of the others, as you can see, are in the agriculture industry. So they have something to do with farming or some type of produce, flowers, plantation, that type of thing. And the interesting thing is that the majority of them are on the East Coast. And even if you keep going, looking at some of these, that's what we find. So the oldest American family business, the Zildjian Cymbal Company, is 15th generation, located in Massachusetts. Actually, it was started in Constantinople in the year 1623 and was relocated to the US in the late 1920s. So anytime you see drum sets, if you are listening to a band, a lot of the cymbals are produced by Zildjian. And just an interesting fact, the Sultan of Constantinople named the founder Zildjian, which means cymbal smith in the language Armenian. But they are doing a lot with their business today, and once again have had a lot of success in terms of the whole process of transitioning their family business. So I want you to think about what are some of those success factors that you feel are critical in a family business transition. What are some things that you feel really help any family business to get from one generation to the next and to just be successful as a family business? Because we are going to take a look at and talk about some of that. Getting back to Japan and looking at some of their success factors, one of the things that research has shown is that Japanese family businesses have been more professionally run than family businesses elsewhere. This gets back to that whole adopted heir, the adopted son-in-law system, because they were coming in a lot of times in a planned kind of way, and they had gone to get a lot of education and get training to be able to take over as the owner and leader in the family business. The core values, those codes of conduct and behavior, those guiding principles within the family and within the business, they attribute that in Japanese family businesses and elsewhere as well. The whole concept of the adopted heir who is coming in to prove something. Keep in mind, this is not their own family. They are marrying into a family, and that need to prove themselves has really shown tremendous results in the performance of Japanese family businesses. And finally, tradition and the whole area of sustainability. We have looked at culture, and I don't mean organizational culture. What I'm talking about is the Japanese culture has really been very important in the long-term success of some of their products, like the Buddhist temple, constructing Buddhist temples. They have stuck to their core business, a lot of these family businesses, and been very successful as a result. What are some other success factors? Globally, once again, William O'Hara, who I referenced earlier, has done a lot of studies on success factors all over the world. And here's a list of 11 of them that he saw repetitive patterns around. And we'll just talk about a couple of them because we don't have time to go into all of them. Family unity, no-brainer. That is always very, very important. Business unity in terms of coming together. Primogeniture, that oldest born son taking over. That is not happening as much in today's day and age as in the past, or in all countries as in the past. But it simplified the whole process because people didn't have to choose which of their children would take over. There was a lack of sibling rivalry. Whoever was the oldest son was groomed to take over. So some of these things worked well in the past. Role for women, whether as wife and mother in the family or playing a very key role in the business behind the scenes or in a very active kind of way. Conflict management, once again, something that we deal with. We have all-out wars at times going on, or very hidden, covert conflict that can derail any process of succession, even the best written plans that can go out the window. So let's look at some other success factors. Companies die because their managers focus on the economic activity of producing goods and services, and they forget that their organization's true nature is that of a community of humans. This is a quote by Arie de Geus. He was one of the top executives at Shell Oil, a Dutch business executive who once again did a lot of research in looking at what helps longevity and sustainability in businesses, and clearly he is looking at the human factor. Yes, we need to have growth, we need to have profitability, but how do we pay attention to the human side of things, because if that doesn't work, it can all fall apart. Have a slide here for you that shows a picture of different parts of the world. This is a study that is being done, even as we speak, by Dennis Jaffe, who I have come to know through the years. He is a colleague out in San Francisco, former professor of Saybrook University in San Francisco, and he has been studying 100-year-old family businesses to look at what factors help them survive and help them move into the future in the best possible way. So this is where some of the percentage of families are, family businesses are, that he has been studying. And he has coined the term generative families. And some of the criteria for success that he has been studying, number one is business and financial success. By the way, 44% of the family businesses that he's been studying around the world have a net worth. The families have a net worth of over $1 billion. That's with a B, dollars. So very successful family businesses. Looking at adaptability being a key success factor and shared family identity. And some of what else he has looked at is the family business looking at not only sustaining what they have, but creating something new. So focusing on the core business, focusing on the wealth, but really looking at where do we go next. A couple of other quotes, really adapting, renewing, reinventing oneself, and looking at that culture. Family culture, and once again, relationships, values, traditions, all those things that sometimes, if we don't pay attention to, if we are just looking at the bottom line, it can really do a disservice. So this is the family business that I said we would get back to, the 17th century, or 17th century, the 18th generation family business in Spain. I met Borja Raventos last year, and he is one of the 18th generation family members. This is, how many people in the audience like wine? Anybody like wine? Yeah, so their vineyard produces a lot of wine and distributes it around the world. And as I have talked with Borja, some of the things that really worked for them have been illustrated. So they produce 60 million bottles of wine every year, and their estate has actually been made a National Historic and Artistic Monument by the King of Spain. So if you're ever in Barcelona, go visit them, do some wine tasting, whatever. Just wanted to share this picture with you. This is the Codorniu Raventos family. It's actually, according to Borja, 450 members of the family. Now this is, I wanted to illustrate here because they do a lot to bring their entire family together. This is not the business of the business. They do a lot with the business. They have 200 shareholders. But just the family side of things, they have governance structures set up, family assembly, and looking at how to really, family council, how to structure the family part of the family business so that that doesn't get lost. And they have done a tremendous job, as you can see. Getting together that many people for a picture is remarkable. So they talk about some of the same types of things that are important in their longevity and their success: legacy, innovation, those values, a clear succession strategy, profitability, growth, long-term vision, relationships, and philanthropy. So we have looked at some things around the world that have made and sustained family businesses. I'm just going to finish up by talking a little bit about some of what we see as success factors in our family, through our work and our family business. So we really see the importance of tradition. What has made our family business successful? So that focus on the core business, but at the same time, the importance of innovation. Staying cutting edge, looking at where do we need to be next. Really being able to and willing to look at how do we have those difficult conversations that we might want to avoid because we just don't want the conflict. How do we really open up channels of communication where there have been barriers? and really look at increasing trust and minimizing conflict when there can be so many differences of opinion around the table when we are looking at a transition. And the ability to really embrace and manage change. A lot of times, and this was said earlier today, a lot of times that older generation is saying, we have a tried and true way of doing things. I don't want to mess with it. And the younger generation is coming in and saying, but I've gone to school, technology is good, and there's this whole push and pull. So how do we make sure that change can happen when it is necessary and when it is appropriate? And we do a lot with managing change. Sometimes we'll work with not only business owners and business leaders, but we've worked with hundreds of machine operators on the front lines, for example, in manufacturing settings, in terms of their attitudes and behaviors, in terms of their deliverables to their customers needing to change. An alignment of vision and values. It's not only what is the destination to our journey, but if I have one destination and you have a different one, and we are on this journey together as co-owners and co-leaders, it is going to be a very bumpy ride. So for us to come together and be able to have that alignment is extremely important. So we do a lot to look at how do people really come together around their vision of the future and their values. This has been talked about. The next one, the clear expectations for the younger generation, such as being employed somewhere else outside of the family business before they come to work at the family business. Leadership development, there is a ton in that whole area. Even in terms of what model of leadership should that family business have in the next generation. In the first generation, it is oftentimes an entrepreneurial, top-down model. The owner calls all the shots, and everyone is used to that. In the next generation, that is just not going to work because the business has grown a lot, and we need more of a team-based model. So how do we get that to happen? And the training and education for that younger generation. Systems of governance in the business, having a board of directors or a board of advisors, in the family, family councils, family assemblies. What are the best structures that are going to help that family business into the future? Organizational structure, I already talked about leadership model. Culture, I could spend an entire day talking about culture because there's a lot that can help. And that succession plan being a part of that overall strategic plan. And finally, really committing to working as a team to achieve goals, to set expectations of one another, and to hold each other accountable. That does not happen as readily in family businesses because we are trying to maintain family harmony a lot of the time. Finding a role for the older generation in retirement. This shows up in literature, in research, as being a very important thing, but we see this in our work day in and day out. When that older generation owner has a meaningful role, and I'm not talking in the day-to-day operations because that can be awfully confusing and give mixed messages. I'm talking about at a board level or in some capacity that can go a long way towards them being able to let go of the power and control. And the final bullet I have here is that team of professional advisors to help guide any family business through a difficult succession process. Because, as several people mentioned, there are financial advisors, there are legal advisors, there are many other people that can be a part of that mix. Our role is more in the management consulting, in the management and behavioral science areas. So the management consultants, business psychologists, there may be different people around the table that need to be pulled in at different times to help through a process of transition. I have, I think, want to thank you all. You have been a very attentive audience. I had a lot of information to cover, so initially I had thought about a process that you guys could interact, but didn't have time for all of that. But I don't know if I have any time for questions. Otherwise, I will be around, and Greg and Anjali are here as well.
I think we could do a quick 1 or 2 questions. Otherwise,
Okay,
yes,
if
they do
anyone
have a
has
booth
1 or
over.
2 quick questions.
All right, then.